Grabación la puedes editar.
Y ahora simplemente uno como si fuera a esconder esta barrita.
Allá los punticos y quitar barra flotante. Pura abajo. Ajá, ahí abajo.
Listo, súper.
Minimizarle la grabación la puedes editar.
Y ahora simplemente uno como si fuera a esconder esta barrita.
Allá los punticos y quitar barra flotante. Pura abajo.
Hola, ya.
Ajá, ahí abajo.
Listo, súper.
Minimizarle la grabación la puedes editar.
Y ahora simplemente uno como si fuera a esconder esta barrita.
Allá los punticos y quitar barra flotante. Pura abajo.
Hola, ya.
Ajá, ahí abajo.
Listo, súper.
Minimizarle la grabación la puedes editar.
Y ahora simplemente uno como si fuera a esconder esta barrita.
Allá los punticos y quitar barra flotante. Pura abajo.
Hola, ya.
Ajá, ahí abajo.
Listo, súper.
Minimizarle la grabación la puedes editar.
Y ahora simplemente uno como si fuera a esconder esta barrita.
Allá los punticos y quitar barra flotante. Pura abajo.
Hola, ya.
Ajá, ahí abajo.
Listo, súper.
Minimizarle la grabación la puedes editar.
Y ahora simplemente uno como si fuera a esconder esta barrita.
Allá los punticos y quitar barra flotante.
Listo, súper.
Minimizarle la y cierrarle ahora sí minimizarle la ventana.
Pero cuando
Acomodamos la luz.
ay, sí, se puede bajar un poquito.
Ella está toda juiciosa.
Sí, qué juicio.
Hola.
Sí, por favor, adelante. Aquí presentando.
No, es que no creo que... Ya, ahora sí. Que se explica acá.
Y ahí están las constantes.
Están ahí.
personas que son eso es lo que te digo. Está la primera, normal, la segunda, tercera, cuarta, le puse séptima, octava, que después se vuelve a eso. Para que no seas quitarse, sino que se vuelve a
Puedes hacer de pronto crear entre los dos videos de ella, ponerle esta.
Mira.
Ah, eso.
Ahí está mi cartera, si quieres.
Mi certificado.
Yo creo, Felipe.
Ahora sí, listo, ahí estamos.
Welcome to the University of Los Andes and to this program. My name is Juan Camilo Cárdenas. I am a professor in the School of Economics here at the University of Los Andes. and also the director of the Center for the Sustainable Development Goals for Latin America and the Caribbean. And it's great to see faces from so many places around the world. And they have asked me to say a few remarks of introduction to what you're going to be hearing today. This exercise of today, I find it fascinating, and I hope you find it as fascinating as me, in the sense that Colombia has had a legacy of transcending political cycles when it comes to using the idea of measurement of poverty, and in the particular case of the Multidimensional Poverty Index. When talking with Felipe about the background of all this history, and it's pretty remarkable that governments over the last couple of decades, from so many different positions in the spectrum, have embraced the idea that we need to measure poverty with quality, with rigor, with good science, with the available data, and commit the government to do that over the years, and commit the technical units that the country has over these different governmental periods. It's an example of transcending these political short-sighted cycles. I think it's one of the interesting lessons that we can derive from this experience. And you will hear firsthand from people who are doing this or are part of the history of this, like our two guests and a third guest that couldn't come, but she sent a video. So that you hear this firsthand from a country who has been trying to struggle with reducing poverty, who has achieved major issues and major challenges regarding poverty reduction, and yet at the same time, and this is how I place this on the table for you to discuss, not being as successful in reducing inequality, which is kind of paradoxical, that you can reduce poverty and yet not reduce inequality, something that is challenging in Africa and Latin America especially. And how we deal with that is something that we need to discuss in the academic settings, in the policy-making settings, with the civil society and with the political actors. How much can one relate to the other one is something that is open. So with that, I welcome you, and I'm going to give the microphone to Felipe, who is going to guide this conversation, and thank these two guests here, who happen to be also alumni of this university and alumni of the School of Economics. So that makes me extra proud, and having you here is an extra delight. So thank you very much, and Felipe.
Juan Camilo, thank you so much for your opening remarks, for putting a little bit of context into what we will be discussing today. My name is Felipe Roa-Clavijo. I am a longtime OPHI member, associate researcher, now based here as an assistant professor at Universidad de los Andes, and I'm very excited to have you all here and to have my colleagues here. Just to introduce this panel and the main theme that we are discussing today, I'd just like to share very briefly something that happened to me a few years back. So 10 years ago, in 2013, I was just arriving in Oxford to pursue my PhD. And I had a scholarship. Scholarship was not very good. So from day one, I had to find ways of increasing my incomes. And for some reason, the first job that I found was as a receptionist. So yes, I transitioned from being from working at UNDP in Colombia to a receptionist at the front desk in the Oxford Department of International Development. So I was there, it was my first job, front desk, still improving my English. And this lady comes to me and she says, I haven't seen you around before, where are you from? And I was like, I'm from Colombia. And this is, this is the first week of my PhD. And she goes, oh, very nice. How wonderful, Colombia. I'm meeting your president in New York next week. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Say hi to Mr. President, perhaps. And and she said, we have an important event about multidimensional poverty in New York where he's going to participate. And I thought, oh, that's very exciting. So I learned three things from this. So the first one is this lady who had come to me and spoken to me was Sabine Alcayer, the director of OPHI, and who knew just in a few months after that, she will become my boss. The second thing I learned from this was that, she was meeting the president of Colombia in New York because there was a high-level event on multidimensional poverty. So I realized, the work that she's doing, the work that OPHI is doing is not only limited to research or to papers or to university, it's actually being discussed at the highest political level. And the third thing I learned was that my home country, Colombia, was a leader in this, and that Colombia was, at the forefront of estimating and using the Multidimensional Poverty Index. And with this, I think this short story of me and how this connects with OPHI introduces very well our panel and what is bringing us here today. And most importantly, there is a lot that we can learn from Colombia. And the best way to learn about Colombia is discussing, talking, and listening to people who are actually in the forefront, who have been part of the past of the MPI estimations, and who are actually the present of the estimations of multidimensional poverty in Colombia. And this is why I'm thrilled to moderate this panel today. And I'd like to introduce our guests. Today, I'd like to introduce first Piedad Urdinola. Also, as Juan Camilo said, we have to say welcome back home to your university. Piedad is the General Director of the National Department of Statistics, DANE. She's an economist from Universidad de los Andes, holds a master's degree in economics from this university as well, and has a PhD in demography and population studies for the University of California, Berkeley. She has also worked at FEDesarrollo, which is one of the most important think tanks here in Colombia. So Piedad, welcome. How are you doing? Welcome to this panel. And let me.
Thank you so much, Felipe, and thank you everyone for being here, everyone who's here in this space, and everyone else who's following us on the network. So this is, I understand, is a very large network, international network, and this is very exciting. Very few things in this world are measured for the whole world. So the fact that we are doing this, and the fact that every country has the possibility to adapt this methodology is really something luxurious, I will say. So this is very exciting for me. Thank you for having me again at my home. As you said, I really like my university, and well, I'm really happy and really excited to talk about the MPI today.
Thank you so much, Piedad. And I'd like to introduce our second guest today, Yadira Diaz. We also have to say to Yadira, welcome back home. Yadira is currently the Deputy Secretary for Public Policy at the Planning Secretariat in Bogotá. She holds a PhD in economics from the University of Essex and has been a researcher on welfare and poverty measurement, health economics, and regional development for the last 17 years. Yadira, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, Felipe, thank you. And also I would like to thank in general to the coach and the OPHI Summer School for the invitation. It feels like home, not only because we are here in the University of Los Andes, but also because I have belonged and I have collaborated long time with OPHI. So I'm very glad to be here and to be able to share my experience with you all here today.
Thank you so much, Yadira. Our third guest had to cancel at the last minute due to some personal issues. I'm going to still introduce her because she was kind enough to send us a short video, which we're going to stream briefly. So our third guest is Laura Pabón. Until recently, she was the Director of Social Policy at the National Planning Department of Colombia. She's also an economist with a master's degree of economics from this university as well, and a master's degree in public policy from the University of Chicago. I think she may be online watching, who knows, but we're going to stream her video briefly. Okay, so without further ado, we're gonna start with the conversation, which is what we've been waiting for. So I have a few questions. We're gonna go on a few rounds, but the first question, just to fill in our participants today of the summer school, people who are watching online, and members from the public who have joined us today, is what has been your connection to the Multidimensional Poverty Index as a public official? You know, you are sometimes professionals pursue certain themes, and sometimes themes and fields of work find you somewhere in the middle of your professional career. So I'd like to start off with Piedad. If you could tell us a little bit about how did you find and how did you end up working with this index?
Well, one thing that you did not mention in my curriculum is that I used to be a professor in statistics. So I was a professor in statistics for 17 years at the National University in Colombia. It's a public university. And in my work as a demographer, I have always been touched by these topics. Colombia is definitely one of those countries with very large inequality indexes. And inequality, you can see it everywhere in demographic data. So since I have been a quantitative demographer for the same time, at least 20 years. So this has been a topic that I have been always studying or related to in my profession, my career. And nowadays, as General Director of DANE, well, I am producing the MPI now. DANE is where we produce this number for Colombia. We actually produce two numbers on poverty issues. It's monetary poverty and the MPI. So both measures are very important for the country, and MPI is definitely one of those measures that tries to measure structural poverty, and that summarizes many, many things. So it's trying to summarize in just one number many dimensions of poverty that probably you in this course have discussed extensively, and it's really important to have measures like this one. It was not produced in the past, not because economists did not know or statisticians devoted to these issues did not know that poverty was really complex. It was because it was really hard to. We did not have the tools in the past century. So now we do have the tools, both in terms of statistical and economic sciences. And this is really something exciting because this multidimensional poverty index has reshaped the way that we conceive and measure poverty. So that's basically how I've been working on this topic for many years in the last decades.
Thank you so much, Piedad. So same question to you, Yadira. How did you, I mean, you're part of the history of this, and we'll speak a little bit about that, but can you tell us a little bit, how did you get into this?
Yes, I started to think about multidimensional poverty since 2009, 2010, here while working in the National Planning Department as a part of the Social Development Unit. And I remember that at that time, with two other co-authors, Renata Pardo and Roberto Angulo, we were very excited about multidimensional poverty, and also we learned about the long tradition of Colombia measuring multidimensional living conditions. And then at that time also we we receive technical advice from the office, from OPHI in the Oxford University. And then at that time, we decided to undertake the challenge to propose a new measure of multidimensional poverty for the country. So that was my first approach. And I think we achieved many things, but also we have learned many others. So it has been a long process. Also, I did my PhD thesis on poverty measurement, so I'm kind of very enthusiastic of the measurement of poverty in general, not only multidimensional, but in general of poverty. And now, at the end, currently I'm part of the Bogotá's government, and there also I'm, of course, as you guess, enthusiastic with the multidimensional measure of poverty. So we have launched very recently a new measure for the city.
And we will be speaking about this measure for Bogotá briefly. I'd like to go back to Piedad just to start getting a little bit deeper into Colombia's MPI. So I'm wondering if you could tell us, Piedad, the process of estimating the MPI, how it works today, step by step.
So the way we do it in DANE is that we use data from the National Quality Survey. So this quality life survey, it's like many other quality life surveys, but in Colombia is big, I will mean huge. The sample is really big. It's the biggest that we have in DANE for household surveys. It is representative not only for the country, but also for departments, for each and every one of the departments in Colombia, all of them, including those in the Amazons as well. So this sample is really huge, and we do a great effort to cover all of these territories in Colombia. Also, this survey has a large questionnaire that covers all these life quality questions. And for the construction of the MPI, we collect different required data for this. As you will probably remember from this course or whatever you have read in the past, this MPI is constructed based on deprivation. So whatever the household is missing. So we have to construct whatever the household is missing in terms of access to public health, education, childcare, and public and private services as well. So we do measure all of those in a set of different questions, 15 questions at the end, 15 variables, I will mean. So this is a large battery of questions that we build up for these 5 pieces of the MPI, and each of these 5 big pieces have the same weight in Colombia. So after we collect the information, then we just follow the methodology to produce it. But the just follow also includes a discussion with a panel of experts. So it's a panel of very good experts, national and international experts. We have people from OPHI as well. For instance, we have professors from Colombian Academy. We have people from multilateral banks, also experts, all of them experts in poverty. And they advise us on the issues that we find during the process of the construction of this index. And another good practice that we follow is that we have a mirroring estimation from National Planning Department. So back in the days, by 1993, the first time that we tried to do something similar as this MPI, it was using questions in the 1993 census. And that was the first time that Colombia tried to do something on the life quality index or something like that. It was called at the time. And it was built up by people in the National Planning Department. So because of that history, there are also many technicians that are experts on poverty at the National Planning Department, and they mirror our estimations. So we produced it at DANE, but we have this good practice of another team of technical people doing the same numbers as well. and we're always under the advisory of this technical group. So as you can see, it's a process that takes time. It's not only like DANE goes, collects the data and sits down on computers and produce the data, but we have this whole process that is a collective and a construction that includes also two large bodies of experts on poverty in Colombia.
Thank you so much, Piedad, for your comprehensive description of the process, where the data comes from, and the different bodies that are supporting the process. Well, public policy, as you all know, is not linear. And so this panel is not linear either. So from the present and from listening how the process of estimating the MPI happens today at DANE, we're gonna walk back a little bit to the past. So Yadira was one of the co-authors of the Colombian MPI back in 2009, 2010. And I'm wondering if you could, tell us a little bit of the process. How did you, for what I understand of the history, you came across Alcair Foster paper, Sabine Alcair and James Foster paper, who you've heard before, and then you brought this to life in Colombia. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I have to start saying that Colombia has a long tradition of multidimensional poverty, or of multidimensional measurement, let's say. Because if the ones that are Colombian perhaps recall that we had the Unmet Basic Needs Index and the Quality of Life Index. So those were indexes used back in the 90s, the 80s here in Colombia. So we didn't start from zero. And we, in the National Planning Department at that time, we knew that history. So then at that time, but we faced at that time one challenge, and it was that those indices were not able to discriminate living conditions properly. So what does this mean? That they were, let's say, outdated, right? So then at that time we had the challenge, okay, so what to do, how to improve the meant, and then we start to learn about the multidimensional measure of poverty that Alcair and Foster proposed in their paper. And then we were in contact with OPHI, and they gave us advice, like technical advice, and we started to work. We were very, very young, not that we are old now, yeah, no. But we were very enthusiastic, so we always wanted more, and we undertook that challenge. That measure, I would like to perhaps highlight some strengths of that measure. And is that when we designed it, we thought, okay, learn from the past. We really want this measure to be able to be, let's say, encrypted, or not encrypted, but it needs to be used by public policy. Okay, so how we achieve that? So we select our indicators. Firstly, taking into account the tradition in the different sectors of how we measure the different deprivations. So this means that we use the indicators that the, let's say, education ministry uses. We use the indicators that the health ministry uses. And with that, we were able to put all those, let's say, technical parts on board, but also we were able to achieve that the measure is able to be transformed, or it's able to be tracked and transformed by the public policies. And in that I think that was one of the main issues that I would like to highlight here, because I know all of you are learning how to do it. And I think this could be a good advice for the context that any of you are working. And also, I would like to highlight from that measure and from that process that I think other other, like, let's say, like a ingredient for the recipe, let's say, like it was that we were able to communicate the index easily to many other different policy partners and policy collaborators. And in that way, we gain support not only within the National Planning Department, but also within the other ministries and entities from the national government. So I think those two things are very important. Laura is not here to share with us the experience, so I'm going to briefly talk about the equity table policy. Ah, really? Okay.
So that was where I was going to go next, and let's see if we make this this video work. Maybe the next one.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to take this opportunity to share with you the experience of Colombia with the Equity Roundtable. Before that, I want to give you some context about the discussions that we had back then in 2018 before the establishment of the Equity Roundtable. What we had seen at that point is that multidimensional poverty rates had decreased as a result of sectorial agendas, but we were lacking an effective coordination so we could address poor households who were facing multiple deprivation. And at the same time, all institutional arrangements that we tried to set for having some coordination had failed. As reducing multidimensional poverty is perhaps one of the most important goals in the National Development Plan, we needed to make sure that all decisions that we were having the highest decision-making level, and that all decisions could translate into resources, into effective interventions, and that we were all working to comply with the same goal. And that's the reason why we came up with the idea about the Equity Roundtable. The Equity Roundtable was established by the National Development Plan in 2018. It is chaired by the President, and it is composed of all ministries who are responsible or make an important contribution for reducing multidimensional poverty.
So that was Laura from the National Planning Department speaking about the Equity Roundtable chaired by the President with the Council of Ministers around the table, and following and with a street light methodology to see how were the indicators of the MPI and other social indicators as well. So thank you, Laura, for sending us this video. So I'd like to go back to the present. And after learning a little bit about the different steps, you mentioned that there are roundtables or council of experts that support the measure. I'm wondering, Piedad, if you could tell us a little bit about the role, first of all, the role of these experts, and how does it work? How does it complement the work you do? And secondly, how do you communicate the MPI, to the general public, right? Because one of the things that is very interesting is the director gives a press conference that is streamed online. That is, I think there are journalists in the room, but these are, very, very complex numbers that need to get your message through. So if you could tell us a little bit about these two things.
This committee of experts that we have, it oversees, it monitors, evaluates, and provides insights for every step on the construction of this MPI. So it's very important for us, not only MPI, but also monetary poverty as well. So it is very important for us to have them under the construction of all this process. So we meet weekly with them. and it is composed by 12 members. 4 of them do not have voting rights because they come from institutions that made them like that, observers: UNDP, OPHI, World Bank, and ECLAC. So along the years, given the participation of national and international experts, the committee has been characterized by the very high level of technical level in the discussion. It's very dynamic. It allows DANE to keep on constantly identifying the best practices and how to improve this index. So for us, me talking as DANE, well, it has been very important to institutionalize this committee in poverty measures and MPI because it has improved the creations and maintenance of these poverty measures through the years, and it also allows us space to discuss the implications around the publication of the number of the figures that we are producing at the end. So it's very important for us to have this communication with the committee because the confidence that the committee transmits to the society, even in the MPI publication, is also accompanied by a statement from the experts. And that's very important. I mean, it's not only showing that, once and again, it's not only showing that DANE is doing something very dark within their computers, but it shows this collaborative process that we're doing it in collaboration with poverty experts from Colombia, international experts as well. So that's a very important part on your second question. On the day that I finally make public the figure, and as you mentioned it, I do a press conference. It's open to the whole public. And after that, we keep it open for everyone. So DANE keeps this good practice of producing everything as a public good. National statistics at DANE are seen as a public good. So everything that we produce is available on our website, methodology, the numbers, the figures as well. People could replicate the whole process because the entire process is published after I give the press conference. So we try to make this press conference as friendly as possible. Perhaps you are training and you know that this is not a simple topic, that the production of this number is complex and it requires complex methodologies, but we use it for the common good. So we need to make it available for everyone. So the press conference avoids complexities on the production because once and again, it will not make me relate to the general public while trying to show a figure that summarizes in just one number, which is the MPI, how good or how bad is the poverty in Colombia. So we try to make this press conference as open to the general public as possible, but all the technicalities and all the definitions and all the issues are published at the DANE website, and everyone can download it, learn it, replicate it, and everything else.
Thank you so much, and I think that one valuable aspect is that what's public is not only the report, but also the presentation. So as a user of the information that you produce, whenever I go to the report and I don't understand something, I am always able to go to a YouTube channel and find the second in which you were explaining that bit that probably I didn't understand, right? So that is really great. So thank you so much for that explanation. I hope you are preparing your questions because in a little bit we're going to open up for the public. So if you have some questions, just get them ready because we're going to open up for public eventually. So I'm gonna go back to Yadira and ask you, how has the Planning Secretariat of Bogotá has been using the MPI? You're of course part of the history, but as in your role as a deputy secretary, you're also part of the present. How is the process of using this index?
Yeah. Firstly, we are using it as a tool to enhance coordination of all the agencies of the district. And this is not an easy task. We have 15 sectors in the district administration. So each of these sectors has its own programs. And then the coordination among all the sectors is difficult. But then at the end, a single household is the one that could receive all of the programs. So for the household, I mean, the household doesn't care whether the program comes from one particular secretary or other one. So what we do with this index is to try to enhance with the current Multidimensional Poverty Index, the Colombian Multidimensional Poverty Index. So how we do it? Firstly, we have identified all the programs that are able to transform, or let's say to eliminate those deprivations that we have identified in the index. So we know how much each program contributes to the reduction of the index, and this is to the reduction of each indicator and each dimension. And then what we do is firstly we track how the program is doing, but also we with a micro simulation, we try to predict how we are going to do it for the next year. So we are able to, let's say, tune our, like, the coordinated intervention of the district administration to reduce multidimensional poverty. So this means that, for example, here we discuss annually our budget. So in the budget discussion, which is made, let's say, around October or something like that, we bring our micro simulations from the planning department, and we show, okay, which is the program that is more cost effective, which is the program that is less cost effective, and let's try to let's say to make all the recipe like more cost effective for the whole district administration, and this in benefit of the population. So at the end, this has allowed us to reduce multidimensional poverty. And now in 2010, when we started with the measure in Colombia, in Bogotá, we had 12% of incidence of multidimensional poverty. And when the pandemic started in Bogotá, we got like a more than 7% of incidence of poverty. So with this coordination and with the effort of all the secretaries in each of the programs, we have achieved now that in the last year, let's say we got our lowest level of incidence of multidimensional poverty, which is 3.8% of incidence. So this means in a city of more than 7 billion persons, we have only 300,000 persons in multidimensional poverty conditions. This is like the first usage. But now, also seeing that we are really improving our means, we now started to think, okay, so we need to raise our bar. We need to raise how we measure ourselves to take into account new dimensions and new indicators that depict in a better way the living conditions for the city. So this I'm going to tell you later.
Okay, no, thank you so much for this comprehensive explanation, for telling us about how this is also included within the budget part of the public policy. I'd like to go back to Laura.
So once the pandemic hit, the Equity Roundtable provided a good opportunity for the discussions on how to respond to with some interventions to mitigate the potential impact of the crisis of the pandemic. And we needed to first understand the magnitude or the scope of what we were facing. We carry out some simulations on the potential impacts of the confinements on monetary poverty and multidimensional poverty, and on each of the indicators of the MPI, so that made it possible to articulate a response to the confinements, and we provided some cash and in-kind assistance to poor households who were hard hit by the pandemic. We put in place programs such as Ingreso Solidario, we accelerated the implementation of the VAT compensation, and as a matter of fact, we used the MPI to decide the targeting of the VAT compensation. We were having some geographical targeting, so the MPI and the numbers that were available from the 2018 population census was crucial for the geographical targeting of the VAT compensation.
Okay, so thank you so much to Laura, because this was also important in how the National Planning Department also used the MPI as a way of targeting vulnerable communities with the MPI and with other indicators in the response to the pandemic. So I think we have an idea now of how is the MPI being used at the national level, how the MPI is being used at the local level or the city level in Bogotá. And I'd like to move a little bit just before going to questions from the audience. Why don't we go to the future? And why don't we think a little bit about, if you could provide us some insights on what do you foresee, as the next steps, the next challenges of MPI estimation and using policy. The MPI is also in the recently approved National Development Plan, so that's also important. But what do you foresee as some next steps in the future estimations?
Well, first, I want to start with the present. I know you asked me about the future, but in the present, we also have national level estimations. We have departmental IPMs because the survey allows it, but also because of small area estimations, we have produced municipality IPMs in Colombia using census data from 2018. So that's also technical advance that we have implemented at DANE. So also we have this municipality level IPM that is, you can now download it from DANE. So it's something that we are exploring and we're trying to produce a lot more further and further. So that's part of the future. Since we produce this one using census data, we are hoping probably with some other statistical techniques, we can do something similar, but using survey data. So that's something that is in the, as I said, present future that we hope we can provide in the near future, but all of this requires academia. So all of this requires a lot of methodologies and the combination of economic and statistical tools to provide it. So that's something that we're working on. As you mentioned, the National Planning Department, during the National Plan Development Plan for this government, 2022-2026, is mentioning the IPM and the in general poverty measures, and it's really interested, and it has a goal on reducing the figure to a single digit. So the last number that I gave in a national press conference was rounding 16%. Is still large, but is reducing from almost 30% from 2010 when we had this number. So Colombia has made an advancement, as Juan Camilo mentioned it. we're moving forward, but we want more. And the society in general, in the social problems that we have last year in 2021, the Colombian society is demanding more. So we have made a huge improvement, but the society needs more. So that's something that is also recorded in our National Development Plan, and this whole idea of reducing it to a single digit is also reflecting these demands from the Colombian society. Something that we also would like to work on, and we have worked already on it, from the operative and the collection that we do on the survey, is we are adding other variables. So Colombia, by constitution, is a pluri-ethnic and multicultural society. Yet, we have not measured much about it. And we are in depth of that. DANE is starting to do it, and we are starting to collect more information on indigenous population, Black Afro-Colombian populations, and other gender identities. So that's also something that we would like to explore further, but again, that requires technical issues to resolve in the near future. So that's basically it.
And thank you so much for the present and a little bit of the future of where you going, in the coming years. And also for Yadira, I also have a question that combines present with the future, right? You were talking about this new amplified measure, using as inspiration the NPI, but going a little bit beyond that. Because when you go into the statistics website, into DANE's website, and you see the Colombian NPI, Bogotá is always performing great in general, right? So has Bogotá reached its limits in estimating the NPI, and this is why a new measure was proposed for the city? First question, and then the second one is, after this and after 20 years of estimations and working on multidimensional poverty, what do you foresee as the future?
I think here for Bogotá, we still have more work to do in terms of the current multidimensional poverty measure, the Colombian multidimensional poverty measure. So we have achieved the 3.8% of incidence, but actually with our micro simulations, as I told you before, we are hoping that for at the end of 2023, we finish with a figure like a little bit above 2%. So this means we hope to reduce at least 1% more of incidence of multidimensional poverty as we are measuring right now. So and that then at that point, let's say like after we reach the 2%, we can say, okay, so perhaps this is almost eradicated, but still there are differences that we find within some groups. So what does this mean? That we are doing, let's say, great in the means, but we still need to work more on not leaving people behind. So thinking on that, we set, and this is also now the second part of my question. So thinking on that, we set a new and more ambitious measure. Firstly, and I want to to talk about let's say 6 strengths of this measure that can be helpful for all of us. First, it departs from a participatory process. So, because we did that, we started this process 2 years ago, and we said, okay, we want to update our measure. Why? Because the population is now expressing let's say, expressing discomfort in other dimensions that are not included there. So we really need to take that into account. And so it was kind of a call from the population, but also we have programs that, like with our exercise in the micro simulations, to see which programs have a more or less effect in the index. We saw, okay, but we are living here. I mean, we are not taking into account more than a lot of more programs that are not here. We don't see those programs here. So what happened? They are not pertinent, or our measure, it's not able to capture all those dimensions. So we say, no, the problem is the measure. So we need to update the measure. Secondly, like as the CMPI, so the Colombian Multidimensional Poverty Index, we also did a participatory process with the sectors, so with the different secretaries. So this means with the Education Secretary, so with the Health Secretary, the Economic Development Secretary, and so on and so forth. And thirdly, we merge administrative data with our household survey. So Bogotá has and this is one of the strengths of the, let's say, like the statistical system in Bogotá. We have a very good sources of information. First, we have the multipurpose survey, which is a survey that has a lot of questions, and so it tackles a lot of dimensions of well-being, but also it has it's representative at the lowest level for to take, let's say, decisions in terms of public policies, which is the UPZs here. So it's a very good source, but still, there is some information that we wanted to use and is not there, but is in the administrative data. So we say, okay, we have this. So how can we make the most of all this data? So we were able to merge administrative data and geostatistical data with the multipurpose survey. Also, because we didn't want to lose the information that was contained that it is actually contained in the Colombian Multidimensional Poverty Index. So we were able to include the current dimensions that are taken there into account. This means that we don't have the same structure, but still we are accounting for those deprivations. And finally, I think, and this is like the most interesting thing of the index, and is that it takes into account dimensions that are not traditionally taken into account in those in these indices. So in general, we talk about education, health, housing, and employment work. But now we added one dimension on the quality of the surroundings. So this means, for example, for the city, we are measuring in the index how are we disposing our garbage, because we want to improve that, and we want to see how this is improving over time. We are including, for example, effective public space, because here in the city, we see a lot of inequality. So there are very good public spaces for some neighborhoods, but there are other ones that they don't have a park, or they don't have like a path walks. So this is very important for the city. We also, we want to take into account whether or not the household is accessing social services facilities within a radius of 30 minutes, because we would like to build a city, a 30-minute city. So if you want to go to healthcare, to a clinic or something like that, you don't need, I mean, currently there is some people, there are some neighborhoods that they have to travel more than 2 hours to go to the physician, or they have to travel more than 2 hours to go to the kids have to go to school. So we want to improve that. So for that reason, we include those, this indicator. And for example, also in terms of mobility, right? Because I mean, for all the cities in the world, mobility is a great challenge. So we want to be able to track that. And this is an important dimension of living conditions of the population. Okay, another dimension is care and time use, and this connects with like a public policy that our the current district administration is very committed on, and is the care system. So we have a dimension on care and time use, and especially for women. And finally, a dimension on exclusion and personal insecurity. At the end, and this is like the last, sorry, sí, exacto, and this is the last strength, and at the end, we want to take into account, and as Piedad was saying, and also Juan Camilo, we want to be able to track this population that we are leaving behind, because this is inequality, and we want to avoid that. So to do that, what we did was within the index, we did an analysis that accounts the number of deprivations that that those particularly populations are suffering at the same time. So we are now able to understand which of those populations are the ones that are the more deprived, but also we included them in the participatory process, so to be able to understand what are their main concerns. So we included those in the index.
Thank you so much, Yadira. That was a very comprehensive explanation of the new index, but it also shows an important innovation being carried on at the city of Bogotá. And just to close this part of our panel, we're going to open up for questions. So if someone could help us with the microphones, please, and if you could raise your hand. Of 1, 2, and 3, and 4. We're gonna start with this 1, 2, 3, 4, and then later on I'm gonna go with you. Let's start with gentleman here on the left on this side. If you could please say, well, this is so we can make best use of our time. It is important that your question is a question, and that it has a question mark at the end. And we will be grateful if you could also say who is your question addressed to. It could be Piedad, Yadira.
Okay, thank you.
And please introduce yourself. Where are you from?
Hi, I'm Santiago. I'm from Colombia. I work at UNDP here in Colombia. My question goes to Piedad. And as Colombian and as a former worker at DANE, I feel proud of the things that DANE is doing. But as you get specialized in the analytics of data here in Colombia, you realize that sometimes the DANE has some limitations about the information that gives to the public. For example, you have the slides, you have all the annexes and stuff like that, and are quite worthy. But for example, when you start to work with microdata in the censuses, you start to realize that there are limitations that don't allow you to have more information to calculate specific things. So how is DANE working on that? Allowing us to have more information to get creative in the investigations that we are doing and stuff like that, go ahead in the things that we have already.
Let me collect a second question. Who was the second person that was on the other side? The other 2 questions were there, so we're going to collect those 3, and then we're gonna go on a round of questions. Please don't forget to introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is James, and I am from Brazil. Okay, and I'd like to ask to any of the members, okay, about the specific challenges that have been faced during the during the implementation of the MPI here in Bogotá and is in the country of Colombia, you know. So I'd like to know if there has been any resistance from the government, from the policymakers, the decision makers, and all the other stakeholders involved in the process. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And then the last one, who was someone who was very close. Yes, gentleman there.
So thank you very much. I'm Carlos Santiago Guzman. I'm Colombian. I work for UNHCR Colombia. Thank you all for the amazing discussion that you have been promoting today. So my question is related to the Colombian context. So in a forced displacement context like Colombia, Yadira, you were mentioning that participatory approaches have been conducted to kind of dig deeper and identify those categories that are useful for a profile of the deprivations that a household has. So in that sense, and I remember also Piedad, the PEDET triage that was launched in 2021 focused on PEDET zones. So my question is, how these categories are taking into account that dimension of, for example, IDPs, and during these days, you know, the Venezuelan situation have like promoted a lot of mixed movement of refugees and migrants. So in that line, how are you accounting for that when you think about the potential use of the MPIs, and what considerations should we have, or should we keep in mind when we try to develop like similar indices like this, like the one that you have created? Thank you.
Okay, so we have three questions. First one was addressed to you, then I'm gonna go to Yadira.
Well, thank you for the questions. So what we're trying to do at DANE is to be as public as possible. We know some people are more technical advanced than others. So what you will find in our website is the microdata, which is already available. But for people probably like you who have more technical experience and are more advanced, you can always ask us. We need to work on this or that. For instance, at Universidad de los Andes, we have an agreement, and both professors and students can use the VPN machine that we have here at campus and access data that is not publicly available on the website, but has this more detailed information that is probably what you will need for this. So we have this agreement not only with Los Andes, but with many other universities in Colombia and outside Colombia as well, and other offices like the World Bank or AIDB and stuff like that. So for experts and real experts, technical people, we have these agreements, and it's available. If you're studying here at Los Andes, you have it right here. If not, it's okay. You can also ask us at DANE, send a QR, and we'll answer your questions. James from Brazil was asking us about the challenges during implementation and if there was any resistance. There are too many challenges. Everything and anything that you can think of, that's a challenge. Why? Because poverty is a hot topic and it's really hard to measure. It's just by definition and by construction, poverty is an issue. We as an economist, we have no consensus on how to measure. IPM is a great tool, but it's not perfect. And we haven't found one tool that all the economists around the world agree on. And we're far from finding it. So all the challenges and all the problems that you can imagine, but we're moving forward, and somehow this construction and this committee of experts that we have and the mirror that we have with National Planning Department is part of these best practices. DANE and all other national statistical offices in the world that want to produce following international methods and publicly available methods and stuff like that, we have to follow some rules for that. And DANE is following those rules. So, and that also solves Carlos' question. So if we want to make a change, we cannot make it overnight. We cannot say, oh, I want to measure IDPs or migrants from Venezuela. I could say it, but it makes no sense. I have to bring up the topic to the committee of experts. I have to discuss it deep and extensive meetings and talk about this with our experts and our committee of experts that, as I said, as I mentioned, it combines both Colombian experts and international experts. And then I will have to have another internal meeting at DANE, and it won't happen overnight. So it follows a process that follows these international standards for quality, and it takes time. So unfortunately for Colombia, IDPs have been long enough that will allow us to have this process. Migrants from Venezuela, we don't know when will this stop. As a demographer, I will say once the problems in Venezuela stop, it will stop, but nobody knows. I don't know, and nobody knows. So it will probably give us enough time to think about it and do the whole process or not. So we'll see.
Okay, thank you for the question, because this allow me to share with you some of these results and how was the process in terms of these population groups. So firstly, we did a participatory process with each of those groups. So this means that we did a focus group with migrants, we did a focus group with victims of the conflict, we did, with all the groups like Afro-descendants, persons with ethnic background. So we did all this participatory process. And then we learned which are the dimensions that are more important for them and that can describe their living conditions. But then based on that and based also on the focus group with all the other population, so let's say, for example, people living in Ciudad Bolívar, people living in Kennedy, in Bosa, which are localities here in Bogotá. We also learned that the concerns are very similar. So we say, okay, in terms of methodology, how are we going to deal with this? Are we going to create, let's say, one dimension for each population subgroup? But then we came into the conclusion, no, we are not going to do that, because actually all of them are mentioning deprivations in education, all of them are mentioning deprivations, let's say, in work conditions, but with different intensity. Right? So what we did at the end, the decision that we took was, okay, we are going to do and to construct the index using dimensions that are that apply to all the population, but we need to be able to have the technical ability to disaggregate this for those population subgroups. And fortunately, our survey, the multipurpose survey, allow us to identify all those population subgroups. So we, in the report that is in the webpage, and that I invite you all to check it online, we did an analysis, and then we find out that, for example, the population subgroups that are more deprived are migrants, firstly. Secondly, victims of conflict. Then also persons with disabilities. Then people with ethnic background. Okay, so those are the most important. And for those also we have, and now I'm talking about the public policies that the district has. For example, for the migrant population, we call it like a new Bogotanos. Because we want to integrate them into the city and into the socioeconomic processes. So we are now creating a public policy, which is a plan made for 12 years years. Each public policy has its own term, but this is around 12 years. And the plan has the main aim to improve the living conditions of the migrants. So how to better integrate them in the city and in the social services that we already have. So we are doing that. We hope to launch this public policy very soon. And for example, for people with disabilities, we launched a public policy at the end, last year at the end of the year. And so then I would like to say that actually in the report, what we say for next administrations, that we hope that actually they use the index to guide the planning, the district plan, the district development plan. The main advice to those next administrations is to really take into account those population subgroups, so we make sure that we don't leave them behind.
Thank you very much. We're gonna go with the next round of questions. We're gonna start 1, 2. We're gonna go next round of questions with these 2 questions here, lady at the front, just here. So again, please introduce yourself and let us know who your question is addressed to.
Okay, so thank you for the conversation that we have been able to be here. I'm from Colombia. My name is Camilo, and I'm a student of Universidad Nacional de Colombia at economics. And as someone that has just finished his first semester, I was in the last meeting and I didn't understand 70% that they were telling us, but I tried to make something in my head to connect with what I have learned in university. And my question is I can't remember her name. Sorry, Piedad. Was like, how can as students starting our career how can we use the information of them to be better economists to the future, as someone who works in something very important to the country, in something that works everything in economics? How can be better economics to use this data? And what do you wait from? What do you wait from an economist to the future? As someone who can help this country, I'm someone who want to be in this university at first, and because of money and many things that my parents did, I couldn't enter to this university. But I'm really happy that my second option was Universidad Nacional de Colombia.
Thank you very much. And we're gonna go to the last question here.
Sorry, my name is Daniel Peñaranda. I used to work at DANE and I'm now returning from a master's degree overseas. I have actually 2 questions. One is for Piedad and the other one's for Yadira. The question for Piedad, you started your intervention talking about the idea that national statistics should be a public good. So in that sense, and like hearing Yadira and the presentations that she was giving about the results of the traditional national MPI in Bogotá, how it's becoming, let's say, unuseful for some purposes because we have exhausted that measure, that puts pressure on DANE in the sense that it allows us to think that maybe DANE should be updating also the national MPI to still understand the inequalities that you were talking about. So having the same measure for each district, municipality, and department, it's actually necessary to understand how does those inequalities distribute. So my question to you is, how do you envision that for DANE in the next 3 years? And my second question, it's for Yadira, and it's more about the technicalities of the process. I read the report, and I think it's really important to understand, to take into account this idea of leaving no one behind from the perspective that you were giving. And in that sense, the participatory process to define the different dimensions and indicators was outstanding. But I was wondering while reading why you didn't take that step forward and actually, for instance, trying to reweight the different dimensions depending on how poor people understood them. So that was my question. So
thank you very much. I'm going to suggest we start with the second question for both of you, and then we close the panel giving advice to a young economist who wants to contribute to her country.
Well, as you mentioned, MPI is now being produced by Bogotá with the different dimensions. We have started the introduction of new dimensions for the past 4 years at DANE. So when I responded to Carlos before, that it takes some time, it takes time. So that's how it works, basically, is how the process is. It's not that we don't want to do it. It's not that we don't want to move forward. It's not that we don't have the tools to measure it. It's simply different. Being part of the National Statistical Office requires that we follow these rules. It's as simple as that. So if you want to be an institution that follows these international rules, we have to follow them. And it takes more time to make changes. So in the past, before Colombia was introduced to the OECD, it was easier to make those changes. Not anymore, because now we follow these international standards. But I think it's good, because it takes time, but it's better cooked, the data that we produce, because it's more transparent, it's a collaborative effort, and the whole country will be more tranquil with this data, particularly in data like this, like poverty measures. So that's something that it is just the reality that DANE works with. But in the meantime, because we know now that it takes time, and when I say time, it's a long time. So in the meantime, we are using administrative records. The approach of administrative records is the production of data for the 21st century. It's happening in many other countries in the world, and Colombia is also following this example. And we are compiling these kind of records, and we hope we get to improve those as well. So we hope to make this exercise of administrative records even more collaborative, because those are not produced by DANE. Most of them are produced by other public or private entities in Colombia, and we will have to do a whole process of harmonization, standardization, and work with them. But it's worth it. That will require time, but we can start doing that, and we are already doing that. So that's something that we're advancing on this. And responding to Camila, and is okay.
Let's go back to Yadira, and then we close.
Okay. 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 Listo, sí. Okay. The participatory process was based on focus groups. Those focus groups were not representative for the whole population of the city. So this means that, we selected them using criteria, like a statistical criteria. So we went to those localities that are the poorest. We went to those population subgroups, but they, at the end, if you sum up all those mentions in the participatory process, we cannot say that this represents the whole population, because it was, intended to be very biased. So then to translate this into the whole index, it would introduce a bias towards this population, these population subgroups, but also in terms of the technical part, then we would have some dimensions with very small weight, and then others with very large weight. And then for the planning of the city, I think we wouldn't like to do that. Why? Because then that could mean that then even a full dimension could be, let's say like a not very important or not very relevant because this weighting problem. So it has, so to summarize my answer, it has like a technical part in terms of the like whether or not we are able to use this information as representative for the whole city, which is not, but also in terms of public policies, because the index is intended to guide public policies.
Thank you so much. Now we're gonna close with the first question of the last round of the advice to a young economist.
So to you, Camilo, and to everyone who is starting now or thinking about becoming an economist, it's really great that you are taking inspiration on this topic. A very famous economist says that once you start thinking about poverty, you cannot stop thinking about it. And it's absolutely true. Once you face this problem, you just want to solve it. We haven't been able to solve it in these many years that economy as a science has existed. We are still hopeful, and that's part of this whole point of measuring poverty. We want to move forward. We want to overcome poverty. That's something that economists have kept in their minds for so many years, centuries, I will say. And it's very important to have fresh minds like yours. So I will say, please keep your mind fresh. Think outside the box. Because as I said in the previous intervention, we haven't found one measurement that we all agree on. So there are still many issues, many problems to solve. And if we think outside the box and creatively, I think we'll move forward. So that's something that probably you can keep on your mind. The Economist, since I was a student in the 90s, it sounds like a lot last century. So we had these discussions on what really is an economist and what tools you should have in your toolkit or toolbox or whatever it is. And I think the 21st century economists should have many toolkits. They should read and learn from other social sciences, not only quantitative methods and statistical methodologies, but also learn from anthropology, demography, sociology, environmental sciences. So that's something that we should keep open in our minds as economists information. And finally, DANE offers also many opportunities for people like you and other students in both undergrad and graduate students. We are trying to install a summer internship program for doctoral and master's students. We are having the pilot this year, and hopefully we will have more resources to have more students working with us. But you can think on your whatever you're doing for your final work and for the undergraduate program, or any of your classes, whatever of your final projects for whatever class you're taking on, you can always use DANE's data. As I said, we also have an agreement with National University, and you will have a VPN there. So you can download always the data that we have on our website, but also if you need something deeper on the data, you can use these VPNs and do more research on that. And we will be happy to have many people interested in these topics working with us in any internship that we have for students in the near future, hopefully.
Well, and on this note of young people and fresh minds and keeping an open mind in the world of poverty measurement, we are going to close this panel. Please join me in thanking these two incredible women who have joined us here today. And good luck in the rest of your summer school. Thank you so much to Juan Camilo, the Center for the SDGs. And we have a little present for panelists. Thank you.